Well, Yate, everyone. When it was established that I would be the first Native woman to speak through this platform, honestly, it propelled me into what I'll call layered emotions. I mention this at the top because this is and will remain a constant, repeated experience for me. Being someone's introduction to an authentic Native experience or someone's gateway to Native spirituality, whatever that even means. Being someone's first Native friend, colleague, partner. And without fail, nearly every time, I spend the majority of our first encounter providing some sort of history lesson, bringing to light just how I am here when they thought we were all dead, or at least still living on teepees on the res. It hasn't really felt like there's been a lot of time or room in my life to really consider the ways I hope to be seen and heard. The instinct has been to succumb to the pressures to embody Native women and not hold space for myself as a singular, independent, complex, anxious, problematic, queer, outspoken Native woman. The anxieties of the expectations of it all has honestly outweighed the value of my own voice into the last few years. Today, I am taking up time and space with my existence, my voice. And what I share today does not speak for all Indigenous or queer women. It is my own, and I share it with you in the most honest way possible. My name is Morningstar Angeline. I was born as Morningstar Angeline Wilson Chippewa to my mother, an Indigenous and white woman, and my father, Sean, a Chippewa Cree and Blackfeet man. At the age of 2 months old, Sean violently passed away from alcoholism, a death I still feel and see new ripples of today. My mother eventually remarried when I was 2 to Daniel, a Navajo man, and we moved from the New Mexico capital of Santa Fe to the Navajo Nation Reservation border town of Gallup, New Mexico, just 3 hours away. I want to point out here just how complicated my indigeneity was already. My mother is a white passing Indigenous woman, and after the death of my father, Sean, I was somewhat disconnected from my father's family and tribe. In fact, it wouldn't be until just last year when my late grandmother was admitted to the hospital that I would reunite with that side of the family and begin healing through knowing one another. Daniel took me into his life and adopted me as a daughter in every way that mattered. His child became my sibling, and this is how I learned to build a solid family, even without blood. Despite our closeness, though, Daniel didn't adopt me legally because the tribal governments, if I was legally adopted to the Navajo tribe, my ties to the Blackfoot and Chippewa tribes would have been taken away. At 2 years old, the decision had to be made about what boxes I would check for the rest of my life on a government document, about how I would be seen and exist within Indigenous spaces. Now, I always reflect on my childhood in Gallup fondly. Although the connotation with border towns is often negative for very valid reasons, I'm grateful to have grown up surrounded by the hidden abundances of those lands through ceremony, community, and family. When I think of my home, I think of flea markets, laughter, food, and ceremony, but most of all, a peace I've yet to find anywhere else, and I'm well-traveled. I grew up lower middle class, and my family was blessed enough to have a safe home, and it also provided a sanctuary for those who sought help from my dad. Daniel was not happy when anyone called him a medicine man, because he never claimed to be. I will say, however, that he led an extremely spiritual life, and he, along with my mother, ensured I had a solid cultural and spiritual foundation. I was taught the values of our elders and youth, as well as the worth of cultivating meaningful relationships with people outside of our own communities, cultures, and races. He taught me how to be tolerant and understanding of everyone, even the religious institutions that inflicted so much violence upon my people, my family. He traveled around the world, but remained a constant presence in my life nonetheless. When he was home and relatives would come over for help, I would drag my pillow from the end of the hallway and come sit by my father so I could watch him pray and talk. He never told me I couldn't do anything inside ceremony or outside because of my gender. He encouraged me to know my cultures, know these teachings so that they could help me, serve me, never limit me. He taught me I was just as much as a Dene Navajo woman as I was Blackfoot, Chippewa, or Latinx. And none of that felt as complicated as it was until second grade, when my mom decided to move to Los Angeles and my parents divorced. We always lived a very contemporary lifestyle, so it wasn't the technology that shocked me. Specifically, it was the social and political aspects of Western culture that assaulted my senses and sense of self. The extreme binaries of race, gender, and the toxicities that exist within all of those spaces, all the unwritten rules, the extreme sexualization of girls' bodies, and the general xenophobia. Even with the foundation I had, it felt impossible to maintain it, surrounded by materialism and consumption. I attended public schools, and although there aren't many Native peoples, although there are a ton of Native peoples in California, I didn't know them. I didn't see them. To me, at that young age, in those circumstances, they may as well have not existed, although I craved to be in their presence. I felt alone and raw as I became a target of racism for the first time. And as I moved through elementary to high school between several cities in the Los Angeles area, and I still managed to spend every summer with Gallup. But with all that constant movement, maintaining relationships or any connection became impossible. I felt like an outcast and found it hard to relate to most of my peers, always drifting towards older friends. And in the midst of all of this, I had a very private exploration into my sexuality, always being drawn to an eclectic array of peoples of different genders and backgrounds. Coming out to the Western world, however, felt like putting a target on my head. So one day I made the decision to hide that part of myself, and I did for several years. My reasoning was, just get through this. You're attracted to men too, so it's all good, right? And I guess I was right. I got through high school and began to feel free. I moved out of my mom's, attended college. In 2012, I felt the need to officially get out of California and come back to New Mexico. By 2013, I was cast in a New Mexico-based feature film, also my sister's film, Drunktown's Finest, and that solidified my love for acting in film. I was beginning to feel myself blossom in true colors. I felt authenticity coming. I was finding my voice, my passion, and although the following years were far from easy, I look back at them as good years. In 2016, Daniel booked his long-awaited knee replacement surgeries. There was a brewing sense of excitement after years of him being limited to not being able to travel because of his health. He told me, order your passport so you can go with me. And I took it seriously. I ordered it and I was ready to learn. I was so excited. After his second surgery, however, everything changed. The surgeries triggered heart attacks, and it was only 3 weeks later that he passed. Now, if I had to pick a single climactic big moment that changed my life and altered me literally beyond recognition, this was it. The universe went black. My entire being felt raw to the touch, and my entire identity was called into question by those closest to me and myself. It felt like the links to my ancestors, tribes, cultures were all buried in the ground with not only Daniel, but Sean as well. I stopped going to ceremony and grieved like I never want to grieve again. And all of this just increased my pain tolerance. I don't believe time heals everything. There are parts I glazed over, so many things I left out, abuses, more deaths. And most of these wounds still feel fresh. And in the right time, they are just as raw as the day they were inflicted. But I am grateful to have grown the tolerance to endure because I'm finding myself again, finding those connections and lifelines to my ancestors' family, cultures, and identity. reclaiming something I thought I lost. And even in the midst of a pandemic and all the rising social and political tensions, I see the resilience of Indigenous people and that resilience within myself. In my lifetime, in my mother's, father's, grandmother's, great-grandmother's, we have witnessed everything we hold dear be destroyed, disrespected, and assaulted. The land, the youth, the elders, the sick, our women, our non-binary and trans relatives, my Indigenous relatives who have had the borders cross and assault them. We live in a post-apocalyptic society, this society. My existence here today should make us all feel hopeful that even in the midst of all of this chaos, we can find ourselves, find joy, and find ways to invest in our future generations. Find ways to heal.